My name is Marjorie Fuller, and I am the director of the West Virginia University Center for Black Culture and Research. And welcome to our second episode of Social Justice Spotlight, where we highlight the innovative methods our faculty use to create a more diverse learning environment for our students here at WVU. Today we have two faculty members from the Reed College of Media, Dr. Joel Beeson and Dr. Dana Coester. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Beeson is a full professor, award-winning filmmaker, and was a major contributor to the Kimball War Memorial, one of the nation's first Black American Legion posts built by coal miners returning from service in World War I. Welcome. And Dr. Coester is an associate professor of media, creator of the digital outlet 100 Days in Appalachia, and director of the Media Innovation Center, the beautiful facility that we are doing this film in today. Welcome to you. I'm going to ask the two of you to tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do here at WVU. And this is not the time to really be shy or to be modest about what you do, because literally the groundbreaking work that you have done has changed the landscape of social justice here at WVU, and I'm not afraid to say that to you. So, Dr. Beeson, we'll start with you.
One of the programs or projects that I think has had an impact here is our partnership with Morgan State University. We have a joint social justice reporting project with Morgan State that we started in 2015 at the behest of their dean. And when we went to Selma, Alabama during the 50th anniversary of the Bloody Sunday March and the Jubilee, and we went actually a couple weeks after the 50th Jubilee, where President Obama was there and everyone. But it was their students and our students in an immersive experience for a week together. They're a historically Black college, and we're a predominantly white institution. And it was really a wonderful experience. And it was in the backdrop of the reenactment of the Battle of Selma, which occurred after the surrender of the Confederacy and during the Civil War, when General Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was a notorious slave trader, commanded troops at Fort Pillow that massacred surrendering Black troops in the Civil War, and then became the first Grand Wizard of the Klan. And there was a reenactment of that took place while we were there. And it provoked a lot of discussion about history and about the sort of trajectory of civil rights in 50 years. And it also took place during the Freddie Gray protests in Baltimore. So we were seeing this sort of arc of history. And I think one of the most important things we can do is to have our students explore those connections with history. Because when we talk about diversity and social justice and those kind of things, it's not just about having different people who have different color skin or something like that. It's groups that we live in this institutionalized culture where the language is the sea we swim in. So that's been a really important project, and that's continued on. We're still doing it. This year we're doing it on the opioid crisis and looking at the different narratives around when it was the crack epidemic and other sort of drug epidemics in the Black community, and the narrative was focused around criminalization. Right. And now it's shifted because it's affected the white community. It's become a public health issue, and how those those tensions exist. I mean, it's not absolutely that simple. In fact, there are gender dimensions to it, disparities in, for example, criminalizations of women for around opioid use, but fathers don't have that burden.
Right.
So our students, we ask them to look beyond those sort of individual stories. Certainly those are important for audience to become engaged in, but to look at the larger, more institutional, economic, media narratives and those kind of things that reveal the structures of inequality and disparity.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the responses that you've gotten to some of the articles that have been posted over time?
More intensely than it does.
Well, I mean,
Thank you.
I would say that when we
Amazing.
were
Dr. Coester.
we were
Sure. Well, I wanted to add on. I think I'll talk about 100 Days in Appalachia as one of the programs, but I think related to this and other work that you've done is that shift. It's a shift in our program and in our curriculum, but it's also a challenge to our industry, where we are shifting from that individual-based narratives to systems-based narratives. And that's really hard because it challenges conventions that have been long existing in journalism. But journalism is failing communities in a lot of ways when it is not able to sort of unpack systems and historical precedents and looking at how we cover issues that are happening today. And I think that your work particularly has been really important in that regard here at the college.
A lot of the work that you guys do is not based on your own desires for your career or your promotion, but to better the environment for our students here at WVU. So I think that we owe you a debt of gratitude for that.
Aww.
And many thanks. So as I launch into the next question, tell me a little bit about the methods that you use in your classroom to create a more diverse learning environment for your students. And how do they respond to that? I'll just do it as a two-part question. How do they respond to those efforts that you make?
Well, I can speak to some of the things that I've done in my class. For example, and it's very interesting, I have them do the Harvard implicit bias tests. And I let them know that it's not a test of your racism or your sexism or yourself. It's not a personal measurement. We're not measuring how racist you are or whatever. What it does is reveal the sometimes or hidden unconscious kinds of ways we act out, and that in fact we live in a language, both a visual language and spoken and written language and culture that has biases just built, wired into it. But it's interesting when they take this, I find that they're very upset when they find out they have certain biases. And they say, I'm not racist. And or I'm not sexist, or I'm not this. My mother worked all her life, and it says I'm biased toward men in the workplace, and I have very strong female role models, and I believe in this, and then they start attacking the test and saying there's something wrong with it. And that's interesting because they want not to be biased, and yet it shows that bias is baked into our culture.
Exactly. Right. And it's not a personal condemnation to try to bring awareness to an environment. But it's very difficult to live in a society where racism is such a negative, term, not to feel some kind of condemnation when you are shown to, according to a test, to have racist tendencies.
Yes.
And I think that the way that you handle it is absolutely correct, to come at it from a non-personal, perspective. Because I know there are things that anybody could say to me that would make me say, are they insane? That is not who I am.
Yeah.
But perhaps there are things in my past, in my environment, that created these feelings in me.
And the framework for the test, again, like you said, it's not about you, the individual. You're the vector for the cultural.
Exactly.
I mean, you're reflecting what your cultural experiences are, and so the more that people can start to look at it not from a place of shame, not from a place of personal, but where am I intersecting with this larger thing that I maybe didn't know existed until now, and I have to start.
Right, through the lens of discovery rather than accusation.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the other things that we do throughout our classes, because we are a college of media, is helping students understand implicit audience, which is another way to get at some of the same issues. And so it's infusing that in all of in all of the courses that I teach. We have a part of something that looks at both implicit bias and implicit audience is it's called engaged journalism practice. So we are building that into our curriculum, which helps students shift from being sort of the center and authors of reporting, basically decentering themselves in the reporting process and working more closely in collaboration with whatever community they're reporting within, or and having more pathways to mining the knowledge of the community to do more accurate, in-depth, context-based reporting. And it also, that expands their sense of what an audience is. Typical or historical journalism was a mostly white audience, unless you had a specialty kind of publication targeting a different audience. And this kind of curriculum asks us to think more holistically about who all is in the audience, and is the work representative of that audience. And that's one of the things that happens with 100 Days in Appalachia, because we are intentionally a more complicated representation of the region. So that includes queer Appalachia, Afralachia, immigrant communities who have, and coal miners also. It's not coal miners. It's just that it's not just that coal mining narrative and that audience. And that is hard for students and professionals to do when that has not been a long-standing practice in either their education or in the profession.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the responses that you've gotten to some of the articles that have been posted over time?
Well, I mean, I would say that when we were doing some of the early work around Black veterans, there was a more responsive open-mindedness in the audience. I think we're kind of in a particularly tense time around race and even the word social justice in America, and that is challenging. So in a way, it also requires reaffirming with students what those values are, so that they're not having potentially a more sort of a internet-mediated response to the word,
Right.
social justice, so it's complicated. But I'll say, we did one of the first pieces that we published with 100 Days in Appalachia was called Muslim in Appalachia, and we had some really vicious, pushback on that piece from audience members, including from some folks on campus. And so it's just we recognize we're in a complicated, polarized time, and building trust in the classroom, helping them, again, understanding the values, that these aren't politically motivated. These are values motivated approaches to journalism. And anyway, it's complicated, right?
Yeah, it's a difficult time. I think, as Professor Coester points out, we're in a time where social media is driving this polarization. It's driving a lot of misinformation, a lot of weaponized kind of rhetoric, and it's really a difficult time. I think 100 Days in Appalachia has done a great job of sort of threading that needle in a way that says we are journalists, and journalists are going to report on facts in a responsible way, and it's not a ideologically driven publication unless you think that journalism is ideologically driven. And we're not advocating any kind of particular public policy measures. We're not advocating that. We're looking at social problems, how people are dealing with it, and what are the issues around that, right?
Right.
In a systemic way. How is the system working? Does the system benefit everyone equitably? Who is it harming? Who is it benefiting?
True journalism.
Right.
You guys, okay.
But journalism has, there are some exemplary examples of journalism doing a good job at that, but there are really valid critiques of journalism having not done a good job at that. And so some of this has to also be sort of corrective and restorative.
Okay, my next question is, you developed a course on race and reporting and also did some programming around that same topic. And I'm sure that there were some struggles that came from doing that piece, and also others that you've experienced in the work that you do. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I'll share something first. Because it's interesting, we just are writing the report on this. So we've done a series of hackathons that involve students and industry professionals and other academics from across campus and from other institutions. And initially it was focused on gender gaps in technology and media, but it very quickly expanded to include all of these other gaps that were happening in technology and media. And then it got really complicated, as you can imagine. So the way we had approached the hackathon was to look at different kinds of diversity gaps in media. So it was, underrepresentation of rural in elite media, underrepresentations of Black voices, Hispanic, Asian, and Native American. And what I learned from that is that was too much to unpack, as one would imagine, and also how different underrepresented groups in that room didn't feel ready to work with each other on the challenges that we were all facing, and also how much time needed to be allowed to sort of bring people along who weren't in a place to do that work. And so I have no regrets about doing that at all, because it was a really important sort of learning experience for us, and also I think everyone in the room. And now I want to go back and revisit that and think about how do we do the sort of stage setting and the immersion and the sort of emotional work that has to be done to prepare people to get together and solve.
Well, thank both of you so much for being here. You've enlightened us about what you're doing in your department, what you're doing in your professional lives, and the personal, goals and missions that you have. I don't think this could have gone any better. So thanks so much for being here with us.
Well, thanks to the Center for Black Culture and Research. You guys have been such a resource and supportive and a great partner in collaboration.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for joining us for this, our second episode of Social Justice Spotlight.